Okay, so Peter is from St. Stephen's Community House, and he's here to talk to you and tell me if I'm yelling. Apparently I do that. This is the class. Did we want to continue with the introductions? Which is great. Anybody else want to share? Okay. Peter, you know me, right? Do you need an introduction? Yes. Helen Lightstone. Thank you, Program Coordinator of Mediation Program, Chartered Mediator, Licensed Paralegal. Currently working on my Master's in Dispute Resolution at Osgood. Done in June. Graduating in June. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to step out of the way, and I'll just run to the back and take notes and have coffee. Okay, you're on. Okay.
Well, I will start by talking about what we do here at St. Stephen's Community House and what that tells us about what other people are doing in alternative dispute resolution. Feel free to interrupt if something really doesn't make sense to you. Of course, keep a list of questions yourself, because I don't want to talk. Maybe I'll talk for 10 minutes and you can take it from there. Yeah, make yourself comfortable if you need to. Am I loud enough for you to hear? Is that working for everybody?
All good, Peter.
Good.
Everybody can hear.
Will we sit in the front?
Okay.
Because I don't want this empty chairs.
Yeah, that's why I'm moving out.
Okay, let's. Oh, Helen, are you sitting here? I was just about to move it.
I'll sit here.
Right there? Okay.
So we can just remove the
Yeah,
chair from here.
there's a bunch of wires, so just. Sorry, Peter.
That's all right. We're doing important IT things. We're modern.
Sorry? Okay, we're good.
Okay. So let me take you back about 40 years, I guess, to the origins of what seems we now are calling alternative dispute resolution and mediation in this part of the world. That isn't to say we haven't been doing this for the thousands of years of human history. We've all lived together, but it now has this new label to our cultural context as ADR. And, people in the room are in labor relations, interested in family mediation and workplace mediation. And those are all origins of this thing, say, alternative dispute resolution. All places, but the 60s and 70s at least, if not sooner, we started saying we need more options here when it comes to things like discipline and conflict resolution and adjudication and so on and so forth. We already had arbitration. Because arbitration around perhaps, but arbitration is a little bit too much like justice, a little bit too much like adjudication, because really an arbitrator, at most intents and purposes, most ways we use the word, the arbitrator makes the decision and says, here's what you're going to do. Or it's such a strong recommendation that you really have to go along with it, or something really strange has to be happening. So arbitration isn't really different enough. What came along then, it seems, from what I can tell, in the 60s and 70s, is this thing called mediation. And it came out of labor relations and family dispute resolution and human resource management, maybe. But it got the name mediation as well in the community. And people like the people who started the service at St. Stephen's and a few years earlier started a service like ours in Kitchener, who said, one, we need to do restorative justice. And this is one of the big starting points, is court-connected mediation. But soon after started saying, why wait till it goes to court? Let's do it in the community. Let's get people who live in the community to help people solve that neighborhood problem or that interpersonal conflict, so they don't have to call the police or their lawyers or the counselor's office or whatever. And that's the birthplace of community mediation, which is sort of as far back downstream as you can go, or upstream, I guess it is. And what you do is recruit people who live in the community serving. It's usually a geographic community, but it can be a religious community. It could be any kind of community of interest. You recruit people who are community, representative of that community, and you teach them how to be mediators, turn them around, and they go back into the community and resolve those conflicts in people's private lives. And that's maybe the easiest way to characterize the distinction, that community mediation works in people's private lives. It's not for your workplace dispute. It's not for your dispute on the board of directors of the local hockey team or residents association, whatever. Those are official settings that you don't get that free, and it's not your neighbors who help with that. But community mediation is for all those conflicts in our private lives, and it's neighbors, it's family members and friends, it's incidental people we run into, shopkeepers and others, where you're not taking them to court. You're not going to solve your problem if the shopkeeper at the neighborhood store doesn't like it, because you're not going to sue them. They'll call the police on them. Maybe they break the law, they call you racist names, but not really going to be terribly helpful to help. So people need this kind of support, and it comes from this thing that's developing in our society, I guess, in the West, and this is our experience. What we do, the way we do it, is mostly in the English-speaking world, in Canada and the United States, and in the UK, and Australia, New Zealand. But maybe that's just because we know those cultures best, we speak the same language. Although when we talk to people in other places, in China, in Africa, in Europe, they say they do this similar thing. So there's a fairly recent rebuilding of the capacity of community to manage conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, because everybody needs this. They just call it different things in China, maybe, or it may have a different historic roots in Africa, so it doesn't have to be reinvented quite the same way it is here. But everybody's interested, and everybody feels the same need to help people have more personal capacity to manage conflicts in their lives. Because we can't be taking things to court all the time. One, because it's just way too much. We can't afford it, we collectively. And two, because it's not that useful a way to resolve a lot of conflicts. A lot of conflicts have nothing to do with laws and rules. And you can't enforce a resolution if you want to, if it's about respecting somebody else. You don't have to respect me if I don't want to. And there isn't any law in the world to make me do that. And we still need a conflict resolution set up, though, for when that's the problem. So this fills a gap that is maybe missing in our society, and we're sort of, internationally the world is what it is. So community mediation is these volunteer mediators representative of a community. In our case, it's most of the city of Toronto, to go out and help people resolve noise disputes in backyards and parking problems and interpersonal conflicts, households, and landlord-tenant conflicts, and so on and so forth. And as long as for one person in the conflict is in their private life, it's potentially a community mediation. And as far as we're concerned, in a provincial coalition of a dozen or more such services in Toronto and Mississauga and Durham and Ottawa and Kitchener and Guelph and York Region, a few other places. As long as that's the case, it's a free service, and you shouldn't pay to do it. You volunteer because it's a community activity. It's not a job. It's not a police officer, a lawyer. It's not something that costs you money, because otherwise a lot of people couldn't afford to do it. So that's community mediation in a nutshell. And I've mentioned in discussing it then that it's connected in origin to restorative justice. Mediation done within the justice system, where you're diverting things from a judgment process to a restorative healing process, which is much more useful in a lot of cases. Or you're doing both, trying a case, finding that somebody's guilty, and then using mediation to do sentencing, essentially, to do the healing, to do the, okay, so I'm wrong, what do you want me to do about it, part of the case that putting people in jail doesn't generally address at all, in fact. So restorative justice and community mediation are separate, but they're kind of connected. They're like cousins. Community mediation, though, is also then connected to the business of running communities, city government processes, bylaw enforcement, the police, and so on, because they should refer things to community mediation where they can't help, and they do. Police and the bylaw officers and the centers and the legal clinics and lots of people understand that community mediation services are really good places for them to send cases to when, one, it's not a case they can deal with. Let's say you call your bylaw enforcement office and they say, sorry, there's no bylaw about that. Nothing that says, apple trees have to be that far from the property line, or nothing says they can't put black stuff on their driveway or something. Well, then what do? Bylaw officers need to have somebody useful they can send you to. They can't just say, sorry, we can't help, and hang up the phone. So community mediation is really useful to them there. It's also really useful to authorities when the authority is in conflict of interest, because your conflict is with the bylaw officer. Who do you go to then? You can't get another bylaw officer. They try to do this with the police, they try to get a different service to be the mediator, but it's not really. So that's where community mediation comes in for a lot of these other conflict resolvers. Is it's a way for them to say, you know, I really can't help you with that. You don't have a legal problem, but you have a problem. You have a personal problem. Why don't you talk to St. Stephen's? They'll help you mediate with your neighbor, because really this is about respect, not the bylaw. Sorry, I can't help. It's also helpful to those services when they say to somebody, okay, yeah, you got a case. We could take it to court, or I could take it or whatever, and, you know, maybe I'll even do that. But simultaneously, maybe you should do mediation. For a number of people, you know, as soon as there's a legal process of some kind facing them, it gets really difficult for them. And they have a hard time filling out the paperwork. It's hard for them to appear in court. You know, they'd like to have their rights enforced, but they need support. And community mediation is often the kind of support for people that gives them an agreement with their caregiver, their interpreter, their sponsor, if they're a refugee. It gives them a mechanism to get the help they need in order to do the legal process. And they're in trouble that way because they don't have the support they need. They're not getting it from their daughter because they're in conflict with their daughter. They're not getting it from the local community agency because they can't get along with the local community agency. They get into conflicts all the time. So community mediation comes in and fixes that problem so people can go to court. Sometimes you have to go to court. What I'm saying is that it fits into a lot of places. It fits in between the cracks in a lot of other dispute resolution processes, and it stands alone on its own. It's some process that can do things that a judicial kind of process, a rights-based kind of process, can't, like resolve issues that involve respect or religious beliefs or other things that you can't make laws about. Patterns of behavior that you can't make laws about, or frankly, you can make laws about that are impossible to enforce. And there's that.
Peter, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt for 2 seconds? We're getting a little bit of a conversation that sounds like it's going on in your offices there. We can hear the conversation.
Yeah, there's another phone over there, and somebody's talking about that. Let me see if I can direct my microphone.
We'll take a momentary pause.
Let me just check and see if I'll be quiet for a minute. There is some background noise here, and if it becomes a problem for you and it makes it hard for you to hear me, just let me know.
Okay.
Turn the microphone. Is that better?
That's much better. Oh, wait. No, I think we can hear them a little bit more. Yeah, we can still hear.
Yeah. Is it too difficult for you? Because I'm in one room here.
Can everybody move forward? Can we move forward? Yeah, we're all good. I think we're good to move forward.
Much. But
yeah.
do let me know
Sorry about
if
that.
it becomes an issue. That's all right.
Okay.
Okay, so let me pick up the thread here. I want to say that I'll talk further about how the fact that community mediation has historic connections, continues to have sort of a cousin relationship or sibling relationship with restorative justice and community mediation. A lot of community mediation services also end up doing professional work. Some of them do. They're not just
Peter,
working in the courts. Yes.
We've got, I'm sorry to do this. We've got one more request coming from our IT specialists here.
Okay.
And they're requesting you sit back exactly. Is that good?
Okay.
Perfect. Just as you are.
Yeah. I'm trying to stay
Other than
close
that,
to
we're
the
doing
mic.
a great job.
Okay, good.
Okay,
So
good.
there's another historic connection between community mediation and other ADR, other mediation practitioners out there in the big world. And that's with family mediators, certainly, because family mediators and community mediators share this interest in really solving conflict by mending relationships. The objective of a mediation process is really to mend a relationship so that people who have the conflict can solve it themselves. And family mediators, community mediators, restorative justice practitioners are much more alike that way, and realizing that's the difference. More lawyer mediators and arbitrators are more about just getting a resolution of the problem. And if it doesn't change the relationship between the parties, well, maybe another time, or that's okay, or if it's only temporary. But there's family mediators and community mediators, restorative justice mediators, practitioners. have this long-term interest in giving people capacity to resolve their own conflicts. So we have strong communities, we have less need for dispute resolution, people help people, and so on. And that means that family mediators can come and do internships at community mediation services and find them really useful, because mending neighbor relationships so they can solve conflicts isn't too different from mending former marital relationships or whatever. It's a transition, of course, but it's helpful. And we find that family mediators make good community mediators for the same reason. And people who work in the courts with youth justice get the different spirit with which the process is done. So there's a lot of looseness. There's a lot of crossover still in the whole field of dispute resolution and mediation in particular. You don't need to be too compartmentalized too quickly. At St. Stephen's in particular, and in some other community mediation services, professional services are also a prominent part of what we do. Not free services, not conflict resolution in people's private lives, but mediation of workplace conflicts, interorganizational business disputes, mediation services for the government who are dealing with managing social relationships. That's the job of the government. So community mediation services can be involved there just as much. Now, they're not doing community mediation. They're taking their community approach and saying, sure, pay us and we'll do it for you. Because people who do things as volunteers are entitled the next day to do things as professionals. There's no real distinction between people in that way. We can do whatever we want. And one of the ways to support community mediation, frankly, is to say to people who have professional problems, hey, use our model. It works really great in the community. And the family mediators like it too, and they charge fees. And I'm not going to do this as a volunteer free community mediator, blah, blah, blah. And you don't do it in a private dispute, because that's a community mediation setting. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you here. But if it's in a workplace, or it's on a board of directors, or it's the minister of the church and the congregation council that employs that minister, community mediator is not going to do that. That's not a private dispute. That's a business dispute, an organizational dispute. But a community mediator can say, oh, let me put my other hat on and do a really good job with a lot of disputes in workplaces, in organizations that are essentially interpersonal conflicts where people have to get along with people, the relationship matters. So this is another, community mediation can be simultaneously happen, blending into, running alongside of, and that certainly happens here at St. Stephen's. A lot of our volunteer mediators are simultaneously professional associates of ours who are employed case by case, contract by contract sometimes, to do professional mediation or training, consulting, facilitation. And that's part of what supports us so we can do free community mediation. It's what's called a social enterprise. This new buzzword that you'll see flying around various places called social enterprise, which means a business operation. You've got to make money, at least meet the bottom line, because you're not subsidized. That's not a business. Of course, that's a joke. In this case, they're saying social enterprise really should be subsidized, unlike most businesses. It should earn enough to do the social good thing it's doing. It's not enough just to make money. You have to do something that improves the community. Therefore, you become a social enterprise as opposed to just an enterprise. And there's a lot of changes happening to tax law and business law and so on to accommodate this new sort of hybrid kind of business, like cooperative stream of business that emerged again from the 60s and 70s, and business cooperatives in housing in places like the Mountain Equipment Co-op here in Toronto. Probably by proportion 40% of you belong to the Mountain Equipment Co-op here or in Vancouver or one of their other 50 stores across Canada. So we're a social enterprise. We do business with people by mediating their disputes, training their staff. A lot of the same people that refer cases to our community program. We'll go do a training for the Toronto Police Service, or we'll do a consulting contract with the Toronto Community Housing Company. And they turn around and they refer cases to our free community program. And we figure this is good business and good social services at the same time. Let's connect it up. A workplace is a community. People have to get along on a team. It's not that different from people having to get along on one floor of an apartment building and not hate each other in the hallway all day. So we figure it's a really good match, actually. And I'm just saying this in a way to expand your thinking about community mediation. It's way more than just describing the simple act of going out and mediating backyard noise disputes. It goes far beyond that if you want it to. And it ties into the schools where you guys are learning to do the next generation of how is this society going to hold itself together. And I think it's good because we need the whole spectrum. We need the courts on down. We need the protection for people's human rights and personal safety that says if somebody tries to kill you, they get put in jail until we sort it out. I'm not a prison abolitionist yet, but the founder of St. Stephen's Conflict Resolution Services certainly was a prison abolitionist. But anyway, we need the system all the way down to enforce people's rights, protect them, to deal with conflicts where they don't have rights. Because it's not about rights. It's about respect, and people can be whatever they want as long as they don't act in certain ways. So there's where community mediation might fit in. There's a bit about how it's being done. And there is this provincial coalition in Ontario that has for all of this about how your training should be and how many hours it should be and how you do it. And community mediation is defined by them as co-mediation, free and voluntary. What else can I tell you? I should stop talking and ask questions right now. Or is it making sense? Does part of it,
any thoughts?
what do you want to hear more about?
Peter, where exactly is your service located?
Physically located in two places. One right downtown, close to Kensington Market. We will eventually be in a new office at Bathurst and St. Clair, actually. So kind of right downtown. We also have an office at Jane and Finch, across from Driftwood Community Centre, in a Toronto community housing building. So we're walking the talk about building community mediation to local infrastructure. Put the service in the Toronto Community Mediation Building, put 2 service offices, and then Warden Woods has their office in southwest Scarborough, if I'm not mistaken.
Warden Woods.
Okay.
Where that community mediation service lives. So, but you know, community mediation is a virtual service. It's done where you live. It goes to you. You don't come to it. We do it on the phone or by email, or people can come in person. But service ultimately goes to you. It happens in your building. You're in a co-op in the common room, or it happens at the local police station, or it happens at the local library, or it happens your neighborhood. And most people anyway, if they want to come downtown, they come downtown. It happens where people want the service to happen for them. So it really lives everywhere and nowhere. And it lives on phone more than anything right now, and it's going to live on email and social media as time goes forward.
Kate?
So you had mentioned that the Toronto Police Services refers you a lot. Are there for doing the care programs with them? Are there other places that you do that with?
Yeah, there's lots of. It's a good question because what was discovered by my predecessor here at St. Stephen's, Nath Rockhill, in doing a fairly formal study of this for a national organization at the time was that the best way to get cases for mediation isn't to go out and try to get an ad in every big newspaper and knock on every door, put a flyer, because people don't remember, it costs too much money. And the best way is to go to the places people already go to when they have a conflict. And there's a short list of places. They go to the police or a lawyer or a courthouse or something, go to a politician, they go to a city government or a bylaw enforcement office or an ombuds office or a human rights, some official thing, state structure. So go to those people who already get all the conflicts and say to them, out of those million conflicts a year you get at the Ontario Human Rights Commission, 10 of them are really appropriate community mediation. You guys can't help, right? So why don't you send those cases to us? And that's why the police refer cases, and bylaw officers and legal clinics and lawyers and social workers and politicians and so on. Now, that's not to say it isn't a good idea as well to get in the papers and have a story once in a while about doing a community mediation, which you may have seen particularly in the Star in Toronto, which is the big paper that covers the local news. We've been in there every 5 years or something. There's a big, exciting news story. And St. Stephen's might appear as having mediated that situation. But mostly it's getting referrals from the people who already own conflict. Put it that way. If you're thinking about conflict as kind of a commodity, and a conflict resolution service needs to get its hands on that commodity, it needs to get people to come with that thing to it and say, here, help me with this. I need this service. Then we're trying to kind of get it out of the hands of people who people already go to and offer their conflicts to, like the police and the lawyers who make a lot of money doing it. We're kind of competing with them in a way, saying, no, come to us instead. We're more useful to you, and we're free, and we're you, and you can be one of us too, and it's got less stigma, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple of reasons why that sort of referral source, right, doing things is, and the other advantage is a community mediation service has the ambition then to say to those people who presently own conflict in our society, if I can put it that way, the lawyers and the crown attorneys, the police officers, the enforcement people, to say to them, we want to work with you because we want you to act differently. We need to see a bit of a system change here in our society in terms of how we handle conflict. This is the sort of mission side, the social side of the social enterprise that is community mediation. It says we want to change the system. Now, we're not exactly thinking we're going to put ourselves out of business, but one way to get better resolutions and stronger relationships among people in our society, which is really our mission, is to have authorities do conflict resolution, approach conflict differently. That's what restorative justice taught us 40 years ago. Take the justice system and using it, do it differently, use the resources we have and use the expertise and the wisdom that's in the justice system. Don't just throw them out because they're wrong. Say, no, we'll help you be better. And, keep doing what you're doing, but stop doing it sometimes. You're doing too much of it. So there's a kind of a mutual relationship there between helping people out and changing the system so they need less help. And that's part of the mission of community. Well, you want to fix individual relationships. We're also trying to fix our entire collective relationship at the same time. It's not that it isn't ambitious.
Peter, do you get funding from any of the ministries like housing or community services?
Lots of ministries. No, well, not directly. Direct funding for community mediation comes almost exclusively from municipal governments, if it comes from government at all. It comes from Toronto, certainly, and I do want to acknowledge the City of Toronto has been a supporter both here and at Scarborough, at Warden Woods Community Centre, and in the past as well at what was called Conflict Mediation Service Downsview, who were a service in North York, located very close to where we are, present Jane and Finch. And for many years, city funded. Then Conflict Mediation Services Downsview folded up a few years ago, and we essentially inherited their city funding. But city funding is also coming to the service in Kitchener, I think probably in Guelph, not yet in Ottawa as far as I know, or Peterborough services, but it is one of the more likely sources because community mediation is most directly helpful to city government, police, bylaw enforcement, health services, housing providers like public housing. I've mentioned Toronto Community Housing, and the same can be said of public housing authorities elsewhere. We also have a long-standing relationship, though, with co-op housing, especially here in Toronto. Co-op housing, as you may know, is nonprofit housing. It's housing that is run by the people who live in it, but they don't own that housing. They simply have the right to live there because they're members of the co-op. It's like a club owns the building, and you're a member of the club. And it's tailor-made for community mediation because the intention of co-op housing is to build not just a place people can live in, but a community in which they can live, and therefore good community relationships and the capacity of people to solve problems with their neighbors is obviously helpful to co-op housing. And community mediation and co-op housing have that common purpose. The same thing is true of some extent of Toronto community housing and public housing authorities and non-profit housing generally, housing that's intentionally built for particular kinds of people, communities of people, whether they be seniors or Lithuanians or whatever. There's an intention that people get along because of their common community. And community mediation then is a really good fit for those situations. And that's a place where I think you'll see more action on this front. Housing providers getting involved in this sort of thing. That means jobs for social workers, maybe jobs for building maintenance people, tradespeople even. There's other connections between community mediation and things like the criminal courts. The criminal courts divert what are called private information charges. Private informations are criminal charges under Section 810 of the Canadian Criminal Code. It says if the police won't lay, I'm paraphrasing, this isn't a legal interpretation, but it seems to me it says if the police won't lay a charge, You can go to the courthouse and you can get a charge later. Because you're a citizen of this country and criminal code, police shouldn't stand in your way of getting justice. So you go to a justice of the peace and swear out a complaint, and they drag the other person into court. They put out a warrant on them if they have to. It's criminal, this is situations where the police have said, I don't think we can help you here. I don't think there's any laws being broken, or there's no evidence, or, this is the fourth time we've done this. A lot of those situations are only ever going to result in a peace bond, which is a piece of paper that the court says, you guys, particularly one of you, is the guilty party. Ultimately in court, you got to have a guilty party. You have to stay away from the other person. You can't call them. You can't go to their house. Maybe you can't even go on their property. You're not allowed to talk to their children. You're not allowed to feed their dog or their cat, so on and so forth. The problem with a peace bond is getting it enforced. It's a nice piece of paper that says the system, the state, is here to protect you. If that person harasses you again, well, what then? You phone the police, and the police come, and I guess it's easier to prosecute next time. But a peace bond doesn't actually mean you have a police officer living at your house. So it isn't really going to stop your annoying neighbor from doing what they're doing. It isn't really going to stop your sister-in-law from stealing from you. It isn't really going to stop your landlord from trying to evict you, if that's really what's happening. So those criminal courts where these charges show up, the Crown attorneys say half the time, you know what, guys, I'm not going to put this in front of Your Honor up there. I don't think we've got a case. To go to St. Stephen's and try mediation. So that's another place where community mediation intersects the formal system, the criminal courts, and says, we pick up where the courts leave off because courts can't do it. Crown attorney can't prosecute that private information. Yes, you had a right to have it on the docket and, your day in court, but the Crown is kind of saying to people, I'm warning you, either try mediation or it's not going to work. That's what you pay me for. So there's lots of ways, again, pick up and get in between the cracks and sort of run right up to other systems for dispute resolution, including family mediation. Here's another example. What community mediation sometimes do in community mediation is help people who have family conflict that really needs a family mediator, like separation, divorce, or a complicated parenting problem after a separation, divorce, where the now no longer couple are still having to bring up one kid in between them. Community mediation can sometimes help people calm down enough to hire a family mediator. And or to help them simply agree they need to do something and therefore make the decision that hiring a family mediator is the best thing to do. I said earlier that community mediation is sometimes helpful in access to justice, in giving people the tranquility in their own life, the support or the clarity of thinking they need to use the justice system, which is a huge problem for the justice system. So many of the people coming to court, tribunals and stuff, haven't got enough support to do what they need to do. They can't fill out the paperwork, they don't speak the language, they're scared to death, and so on. Same thing with family process. So community mediation is often sort of access to another kind of justice. And family can be an example where we might get a family to agree, we need a family counselor, let's bite the bullet, spend the family fortune, or get the reluctant party to agree with the other party to pay for it, whatever. So community mediation, again, fitting in between the cracks, kind of trying to dovetail with other ADR processes. And that's what makes it a really useful experience for a lot of people who volunteer with community mediation or do internships with a community mediation service. It gives you a fairly broad experience of workplace, neighborhood, crossover kind of family. It gives you a really diverse experience because odds are many different cultures and kinds of people are going to be involved in neighborhood disputes. And so you get used to working with lots of backgrounds and so on. That's really helpful. Because it's co-mediation, always co-mediation, you've always got two mediators. It's the best way to learn because you get all the support you need right there in the room. But if you don't need support on it, you have a lead mediator who's smart enough to let you run the show and would simply be there as a safety net. So co-mediation is a good thing. You learn both solo and co-mediation if you can, because neither one is good enough, frankly. But co-mediation is better if you can only learn one, because from co-mediation, you're more likely to get to solo mediation than the other way around, it seems to me. having talked to lots of solo mediators, and also because solo mediators are so often so lonely for support and a community of practice, somebody to talk to say, here's what happened at my last mediation. Help me out. What did I do wrong? A lot of mediators, so private practice or where you're hired by a firm to be the mediator in the HR department, you have nobody to talk to. Well, in community mediation and large restorative justice, always have a community practice because you always do co-mediation. At least you got one other person to talk to. So there, I'm rambling off in terms of other directions. Let me stop talking and see, are there more questions, comments? Anybody want to argue back? Did I say something wrong?
No, it's good. Any other thoughts or comments so far?
I must have said something. I must have said something
Yeah.
that was not entirely correct.
Kate, do you, wait a minute.
Peter, do you have flexible hours so that you can accommodate some of the families who are working, like evening hours and weekends?
Yeah, community mediation in particular has to acknowledge that it's done in people's private lives, therefore it has to be done when they can do things in their private lives, not at the workplace. So that's the flip side of the fact that it's done in the community where people live or anywhere they want it to be, and it's also then done at whatever time they like. And that usually means evenings and weekends, but if people are seniors or work shifts or whatever, it can mean you got to have a handful of mediation, a handful of volunteers in your community mediation service who can also do things during the workday, because that's when the mediation at the seniors home has to happen or whatever. But yeah, it's got to be, and it's good business as well. I'm speaking again from the sort of social enterprise. The same thing applies when we're doing workplace mediation. Hey, if you want to do it in the evening, even though it's the company, because you're a company that works shifts, sure. What time do you want us there? 1 o'clock? Fine, we'll be there at 1 o'clock. That's in the morning, right? Okay, good. We'll be there at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's just good business as well.
Nice.
And the same thing can be said, a bit of a segue here, but maybe a helpful one. I want to get the topic in. It's about where people live and where they have their conflicts, and the strategy in community mediation which says go to that place rather than bringing them to the courthouse, which, frankly undermines a great deal of your potential help in getting these people in their ordinary lives to be more functional. It's not just physical location and timing and accommodating support, translators, and so on. It's also, in the modern world, accepting the fact that more and more people are living their entire relationships with other people in virtual space. They're not actually living in the same place at the same time. It's not that they don't live in the same apartment building. They don't live in the same country. And one of the clients for community mediation could be somebody in Toronto who has a conflict with their friend on Facebook / Twitter / their personal emails and telephone calls and so on. And therefore, the mediation needs to be done on the phone or like this, with a virtual video setup like your college has provided, or it needs to be done in some other setting. And we're not that good at it yet because the technology is something that we're all trying to catch up with. How do you really do FaceTime, and what language do people speak in email and Twitter and texting and stuff, and how is that changing how people relate? We're catching up with creating this new way of relating to each other virtually, but we have to go there. As community mediators, we certainly do, because that's the community people live on. They're avatars. They're not real people at all. Oh, yes, they are. They're just lying in their bed all the time. Fine. We're not judging people. That is who they are, and it is where they live their lives. So it's going to be interesting. There will come a time when there'll be community mediators on our roster who are the specialists in doing it through Skype or through this platform, Connect One, Resolve, or whatever. And that's, again, a necessary thing for community mediation, because you got to go to where the community is and you got to talk the community's language. You have to be the community in order to mend the relationship that exists through that community. It's also just good business. Got to go where people need your services, most easy place possible, so the pain of paying for it is as little as they can get away with.
Right.
So welcome to the modern world, and the classroom you have is a good teacher for you as well. Take advantage of it.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Any other questions from anybody? Any thoughts? So I'm going to ask about just getting back to the mediation process itself, from start to finish. what would an average time frame be? How long, or how do you choose your mediators? Does somebody have to be representative of that community that they're going to, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, so more sort of specifics about the delivery of the actual service. Well, the process can take, I'll give you two different times, anywhere between, a few weeks or maybe even a few days on the extreme end, as quickly as possible. Could you do a community mediation within a couple of days? Well, yeah, it's possible, I guess, but it's pretty tricky. A few weeks, a few months for sure. That's a typical timeline to do a community mediation. And in that respect, it's way quicker than a lot of other processes and slower than some. But in that respect, it's not a really good crisis management thing. So don't think of community mediation as crisis management. If you're getting kicked out by your landlord and the sheriff is knocking on the door, there with the drill to change the lock, it's too late to call
Too late.
the mediation service. But, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, you're good. And that's what they would usually do in the courts, for example, if they divert something into community. Why don't you go try community mediation? They'll give it 60 days or better, 90 days. The mediation itself takes like 3 or 4 hours once you get the room and the parties sitting there face to face. And it is face to face, and it is the parties themselves who have to figure this out because it's their conflict. That's the principle behind how we do, and this Ontario Community Mediation Network do community mediation. The parties themselves, it's their relationship that needs to be mended. So the way in which they have that relationship, that's what needs to be in the room. That almost always means face to face, unless there's a cultural reason why some people can't talk to some people or something, but that's not that common in this country. So it takes a few hours. It can take 2 sessions of 3 hours if it's really complicated, or if there's interpretation involved, or if it's a multi-party situation. I just had met with one of our volunteers and associates for another reason yesterday. He reminded us of a mediation he'd done, a circle process, which was 15 people in the room. It lasted 11 hours.
Wow.
That's what they needed. That's what their community of interest was happy doing, because that's how they worked and that's what was needed. And they all agreed, and they did 11 hours in one room at the same time. And they had food to the side and jokes that there was a pregnant woman at the beginning and there was a little baby at the end. So,
Excuse me.
so anyway,
Cute.
usually you're talking about those people having to put in, 10 hours of their own time to meet with our mediators first in private, then to meet with the mediators and the other party to do the mediation, maybe to do another mediation because they didn't finish the first time, and then maybe do a follow-up meeting 3 months later because the agreement's working, but there's one thing that's not working. We check bounced or whatever, and so we do a follow-up. So, the whole thing is involving people for 6, 8, 10 hours of their life. Small price to pay over the course of several months to resolve what would otherwise ruin your life. So the process is light on people that way, frankly. And even if you have large numbers of people, collectively, it's not that bad. You pick the people who do the intervention from your roster of volunteers, your potential mediators who be recruited and trained and supervised, and you know who they are. And there's a whole lot of reasons why any particular 2 of them, or occasionally 3, might be assigned to a particular case. How much you need to match the backgrounds, the experience, the class, the culture, the gender, and the age of the people involved in the conflict depends on the conflict. Sometimes it's irrelevant. Any mediators will do. Sometimes it's critical. The wrong mediators, and you're not going to get anywhere. So there's a whole range of end part of the job of running a voluntary community mediation service is having people who have the ability to assess and make those decisions, who can figure out what the parties need, can understand their answer to that question if you ask that question, and you almost always do, who can read between the lines, so and so and so and so. That's what this needs. It needs the really organized mediator who's going to keep it on time and stuff, and it needs the organic thinking, emotional, responsive mediator. So I'm going to assign A and B. That's the team. And, good thing. A is also the visible minority, because we know from party 1 that they've clearly said to us, don't send me 2 white guys in suits, please. That's not going to work for me. That's what they did the last time. So, there's all kinds of factors. And every time, every case is different. And if it isn't different, then you sort of catch yourself saying, So really, there's nothing we should be thinking about here in assigning this case. That's a great luxury, because then you as a service get to say, good, I can assign that new mediator who I've been looking for a case for. Got to get them the experience quickly after training, or they're going to get rusty really quickly. And I can finally assign so-and-so in their, first case as a lead mediator. I wanted an easy one for them, and this is an easy one, or something like that. So you have reasons yourself as the person providing the service to choose who you want to do which case if the partners don't give you a reason. And in fact, you always have both of those sets of reasons.
Okay, excellent.
Let me say, further questions, comments, reactions?
We do have a question over here.
Do you perform a lot of follow-up mediations?
Yeah, you always have to do follow-up of some kind. You have to build it in fact, to our administrative process. Any good service, any good business, any good product provided to any public or marketplace, you don't have follow-up, you're losing business, man, and you're doing a shoddy job. So we have to follow up in two ways. We have to follow up with the people we serve as St. Stephen's Community House to say, were we respectful? Did the people do a good job? Any suggestions for us? And we have to follow up procedurally as the mediators to say, did the mediation work? Are you still getting along? Are you now able to have conflicts better than the conflicts you had before, which is all we can hope for? You're going to still have conflicts, so we're just teaching you to have good ones here. We have to do that kind of follow-up or we're not doing our job. And in a lot of mediations, you have to do follow-up because your job as a mediator is to do due diligence in helping these people resolve the conflict. If you know coming out of the mediation that they've got an agreement, but it's not going to be easy for them, you have an obligation, right? If they can afford it, and hey, it's a free process, of course they can afford it, you have an obligation to say, I'm going to follow up with you. We're going to follow up with you. We're going to phone you and, find out that it didn't work so we can get you to come back to the next session. Because we all know here that you have more work to do together, but you're tired tonight and you're pretending to agree just so you can go home. Now, you know what? I'm with you on that one. I want to go home too. But we're going to start again. We're going to phone. So yeah, follow up every time. And you need follow-up too if you're a community mediation service. Well, you need follow-up in any case because you got to have the statistics. You're going to have the evidence to prove that what you're doing works. 3 hours later, 3 days later, 3 months later, if your service says we're going to change things, you got to be able to prove things have actually changed in these clients' contracts over this period of time, or you're not going to get any more business, or you're going to lose your funding as a community service. The grantee is going to say, we're not going to give you a grant anymore. You have no proof that this actually makes any difference to people. They just come out of the mediation feeling happy, but do they actually have better conflicts in the future? You guys have no way of telling us. It could be you're doing the same things over and over and over and over and over. Well, that's no good. That's not getting us anywhere. We need to see that you're building capacity in people so you don't have to do what you're doing anymore. It's kind of like any marketplace. You go buy something in the marketplace. You're saying to the person selling it to you, I don't want to have to come back and buy it again. It's either going to fill me up and I don't need dinner anymore, or it's going to get me up and down the highway for 5 years. Or I don't want to buy it. And mediation's the same way. People should be saying, I want you to solve my problem and help me learn how to solve problems with this other person so I don't need your service anymore. I'm not looking for a retainer here. I'm not looking for a long-term relationship. Now, organizations are, the police are, because they have lots of confidence. Individuals can be because they have lots of confidence. But ideally, again, mediation doesn't just solve the problem, it mends the relationship so people can solve the problem themselves. And that's the value added. That's what makes it different from the courts or just hiring an advisor or an accountant or something.
All right.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Peter,
that's ambitious.
You talked about restorative justice. Do you work with any young offenders?
Yeah, we do
In the
work
courts?
with young offenders. I mean, we work with at our youth department here at St. Stephen's. We're part of a big community agency called St. Stephen's Community House. We're the conflict resolution service. There's also another department called the youth department, and they have the long history of working with youth probation and the school system and the courts and so on, particularly to do work with young offenders. We also, though, have a history of supporting them and doing some projects with youth workers. And between us right now, and this is just current affairs here in the province of Ontario, the Ministry of Children and Youth Services seems to be taking the direction that they want to move youth justice out of the justice system as much as they can. This is a good thing as far as we're concerned. They want to decriminalize conflict among youth because an awful lot of it is youth have to figure out how to live life. And it's not gang violence, it's, just schoolyard stuff. And it's interpersonal, even if it is gang violence, people still have lives. So they seem to be moving in the direction of piloting dispute resolution for youth in schools that tries to get the case before the police get involved, that tries to do it in a way that's, let's not have a charge here. Let's not make it a young offenders situation. Because right away, all kinds of stuff comes down and it gets really complicated and the lawyers are involved and the insurance companies start charging fees. So the objective is to get communities like school communities capacity to deal with their own schoolyard disputes better in the schoolyard. So they don't even have to phone the police or the vice principal for that matter. Now, that's not yet happening and a lot of youth justice happens, but look for that in the future and support it if you can. Push this stuff out of the justice system and back into people's private lives where a lot more of this stuff belongs, and we'll need to figure out how to do it, otherwise we're swamped.
I'm sorry, I was also thinking about the restorative justice part of it for the young school children and people involved in the conflicts at the schools. Is that that's been tried as well and being used?
That's precisely what I'm talking about. Restorative justice in criminalized situations. I mean, those two go together because restorative justice, I consider it, this is my language, restorative justice means it's part of the justice system, with a capital J, meaning the courts, the police, probation. What the ministries appear to be doing is saying, we need youth justice in the justice system. We need to give youth, it's kind of ironic in a way. It could be the powers that be at the provincial government, and this is primarily a provincial responsibility, are saying, youth need this more because it's more important for youth. We need good, strong youth with, who haven't been traumatized by the courts and haven't been beaten up by the jail system. Or it could mean that those powers that be are saying, let's practice this on young people. Because, if we do it on adults, they'll be hell to pay. Somebody will take it to the Supreme Court and the other opposition parties will get a hold of it. We can do things to children we can't do to adults. I'm being cynical about politics here, but you use your own judgment. Either way, there's a lot of youth justice stuff happening, and we don't do a lot of it at St. Stephen's Conflict Resolution and Training, a lot of it at Youth Department, St. Stephen's Community House, although we do get involved in it from time to time. But I think what the future holds is the pushing out of youth justice out of the justice system. So the justice system is where you're going to go in youth justice when you really have a criminalized situation. There's been a shooting, somebody's stolen something, there's no question. We need laws and we need property rights and safety and human rights and stuff. But a lot more schools and a lot more policymakers at the province, I hope, are realizing we're casting way too big a net here. We're getting an awful lot of situations that aren't really about rights and obligations. They're really about social relationships and safe schools and the culture of the school community and how can we support those things happening out there away from the police station and the courthouse, so the police station and the courthouse don't even have to worry about this. Not their problem. It's being dealt with by the youth themselves, frankly, and that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal of community mediation, and I believe it is an ultimate goal of restorative justice as well. Give everybody the capacity to do personal justice, and we need a lot less state justice, and we don't even need restorative justice because it's happening in the community. It's not justice at all, it's just people getting along. So it's a good question you ask. The short answer is yes, we're there, it's happening. I'm encouraging it and will encourage it to happen all over the place. More restorative justice in the courts is a good thing, and it's coming in family. It's coming in the tribunals now, especially. And this is a big change, that the tribunals are doing restorative justice, not just the courts. Tribunals are where like half the conflicts or more in our society happen. Landlord-tenant board, human rights, social benefits tribunal, the refugee tribunals, The tribunals at the city, I was just at a meeting this morning with the City of Toronto who have tribunals that adjudicate, frankly, mediate sometimes disputes over things like parking fines. And Committee of Adjustment at the City of Toronto is going to be piloting mediation services and so on. So there's a lot of stuff, pushing stuff out of the formal justice system into this far better alternative when it's the appropriate alternative. Good potential for you guys.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, very good.
I hope it's
Very good.
that it means you're not exactly going to graduate and get a job the next day that pays you a pension. But prospects are looking up, and the program you're in is a good program in that respect.
Thank you.
It can lead you in a lot of directions. It can take you into community mediation. You won't get a job there, but you'll get experience, and you'll win credentials, and you'll get contacts, and you'll get confidence, frankly, that you know what you're doing because you will have actually done mediation. But what you're learning here can also take you into, again, human resource management and paralegal work and justice system work if you're a Crown attorney or you want to, that kind of thing. Lots of other professions, lots of other places. And it can be useful to you in your church. It can be useful to you in your ratepayers association or your union or your neighborhood sports league that you get on the board of because your children are getting traumatized in hockey because the parents are so big and angry. So then again, there's stuff coming out all over the woodwork. Use this in a lot of different places.
It's good. It's good.
Do we take interns? Peter, do you take interns in St. Stephen's?
We do. We have formal internship relationships, however, with particular schools. An internship for us means you have to be in a school, a university or college program. And Stevens has formal relationships with several ADR programs in several colleges and schools. Not in the college you're in because you're in Durham. And while it isn't inappropriate, and somebody who lives in the city of Toronto but goes to your college could approach us and say, hey, I'd like to do an internship at St. Stephen's or Warden Woods in Scarborough, be maybe more likely potential given the proximity. We would work it out between the program and yourselves and ourselves. And we would be intending to work it out in a way that having worked it out for you, it can now work for every other student going forward. That's what we've done with several other schools. Now, in your situation, however, your better alternative in your program is Community Justice Alternatives of Durham Region, your local community mediation service. They're based in Ajax.
Ajax. Yeah.
And they have volunteer mediators and they do internships and they ought to talk to you first. And frankly, St. Stephen's would say, better talk to them first. We don't want to poach, students from the institution, which is located where it is. We don't want to steal you guys from the local service. You want to work with the local service so you're connected to the college and the local service, and you probably live, or if you do live in Durham, and there's the third reason. You can't be a long-term volunteer with Community Justice Alternatives if you don't live in Durham, but you could do an internship, and through the college, it makes more sense to do it there than to do it downtown. In the long run, if you live in Toronto or Scarborough, then you apply to one or the other of us to be a volunteer. But if you live here in Durham College, and especially if Community Justice Alternatives says, no, that's fine. We have lots of students who need you. Then you could go anywhere you want and you can ask us. So yes, please do keep thinking. And let me thank you again for your question and take advantage of the opportunity to say, this is the big challenge, I think, in learning to be a mediator or any kind of alternative dispute resolver, getting practical experience. And I know, Helen, that this is something that's high on your agenda. You know that this is a profession, that you have to do it in order to learn, like riding a bicycle. And think about that. You'll get way more value out of the time you're spending in the classroom, and Helen will have a much easier job giving you value for the training you're getting if you can put it into practice simultaneously if you can, or as soon after as possible in whatever setting you can, whether that's with your family at home and they catch you being a social worker and accuse you of it, or whether it's at your local church or your ratepayers association meeting, your tenants association, your co-op, or whether it's in your workplace, or whether it's in any other setting, whether you can become a volunteer for CJA Durham. Now, put it into practice or you're never going to learn it. And,
That's true.
My job interview on the basis of this certificate you're getting or this qualification that you're getting right now, But in the job interview, the first question they're going to say is, so I hope you liked that course. What have you done with it? Have you actually ever done? And if you can't say yes, somebody else probably can, won't get the job. So a very competitive field out there still, because there's lots of you in the room and there's not that many jobs. So put it in practice any way you can. Do the practicum, become the volunteer at Community Justice Alternatives. And here's some informal advice. If they sort of give you the first answer, we're really busy right now, we don't need anybody. Think about going back to them and trying again by saying, here's what I want to do, and I'll do it for you for free. That's what I mean when I say I'll be a volunteer. I'll do the outreach in where I live, Scugog or something, or I'll come into the office. Are you sure there's nothing I can't do 2 afternoons a week? Like return phone calls or type things into the computer, or I'll go to meetings and tell them about your service. So be imaginative in suggesting concrete things to them that you can do for them beyond being a volunteer mediator. Because the payoff for you is they say, fine. If you do all that, we'll make you a volunteer mediator and give you a case. Then you get the real experience you need. But community services are often hard pressed to absorb people quickly and easily. And if you can make it easy for them, you can invent the job that they would give you as a volunteer and hand it to them on a silver platter. They might be more willing to say, oh, okay, well, in that case, seems you know what you're doing already. If you'll use the following language and our phone number, great. Let me know how it goes. So you might find you got to be the entrepreneur here. You got to, be a little innovative and trying to think, how am I going to get myself into this workplace to get the credentials I need? And it could be community justice alternatives, or again, it could be your workplace, it could be your community. Think about approaching it that way as a kind of an entrepreneur saying, can I give you something in exchange for you giving me nothing but opportunity? That's more likely to succeed than saying, where do I apply? Because 100 people have just applied for you.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and I totally echo that idea completely. Go step forward, give it a try. Absolutely. Any other comments or thoughts, questions? Anything else? Pardon me?
Does that cover the basis for you? If you do have further
I
thoughts,
think it does.
through Helen how you can send other questions potentially, or ask for some
Of course.
clarification. Yeah. Screaming at night, not being quite sure what it was you heard, and it's keeping you awake.
Okay. We'll reach out to you. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thanks for doing what you're
Always
doing.
great to see you.
Welcome to the modern world.